A very, very good morning to all of you here. I'm Cicely George, the Executive Director of Thai Dubai, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome each of you to today's session. So for today's event, I wasn't sure whether I should ChatGPT or DeepSeek for my introduction. So I decided not to get political about things, and I'll use my own introduction. And I want to applaud and acknowledge ourselves for the timing of this event, as there was no DeepSeek known to us when we planned it. Thank you, Suvo. Thank you, Christina. And of course, the Thai Dubai event led by Bianca. To everyone here, thank you for staying away from your morning golf. I know some of them are not here because of that, finishing gym early, taking time out from your family. If you brought them along, great. We're a community that fosters learning as well as inclusion, no matter the age or stage of life. Before we start, I know there are quite a few people who are new to Thai. I'd like to share a few words about Thai Dubai, so that, we have a better understanding. In a nutshell, it's an organization that started as a conversation in Silicon Valley in 1992 and now has spanned to over 64 chapters in 14 countries. I think the latest ones are Thai Phoenix, Sri Lanka, Amsterdam, and it keeps adding up. So it's a great community. In my opinion, I think it functions really close to the heartbeat of the entrepreneurial community wherever they are. They foster diverse and vibrant mindsets of founders, outliers, investors, successful entrepreneurs, work with the government, accelerators, corporates, incubators, etc. We work together in sync with our various partners who helps make the magic happen. I would like to specially acknowledge Dubai Internet City in 5, who are like extended family for us, literally. And Skyline College, Paramount Computers, Ask Pankaj, Tonic Worldwide, E&, US Mission for UAE. So Thai functions on 5 main pillars, mainly mentoring, networking, education, funding, and incubation. While Thai has the global reach, the chapter always focuses on the local ecosystem. So we'll build our programs on the local ecosystem, and I'd like to just highlight 3 of our great programs. Thai Dubai has been here for more than 23 years, and the first program that I'd like to highlight is the mentorship program, extremely beneficial for companies that are looking for support from seasoned and successful entrepreneurs who will actually help you navigate your startup journey better. The mentorship batches runs in cohorts. There's one running now. The next one will open only by end of the year. It's an absolutely transformational journey, and we have lifelong mentors that we see come out during this program. Then there is a Thai Women MENA program focusing on helping women entrepreneurs. Quite an amazing program. We represent 5 regions as a chapter across the globe. One of the biggest women-founded pitch competitions global program globally. So this year, it'll be the 6th year. We have representation in the Emirati category. UAE is separate. Then we represent Egypt, Saudi, and rest of Middle East. So we work with multiple women founders, shortlist them, give them a platform. They come to GITEX, they get equity-free prize money, they fly to the Thai Global Summit, pitch over there. So there's a huge and a lot of exposure, a lot of connections, a lot of learning through this program. The other one is the Thai U program that works with early stage ideas and entrepreneurs. I know a couple of university people are here. And this is the 7th year that we're running here in this region. And this year, the timelines have changed, and there are some new elements that we will be looking at adding. They will culminate at the Thai Global Summit, where they have access to a lot of value sessions, boot camp, etc. And I'd like to actually call on Bashar to just say a few words, because we're trying to work a lot more with the universities and with the youth through this program. Because of this timeline change, we want to be able to expand and, help them. Bashar is our president. He's a digital advocate, AI.
Thank you, Cicely. I think just to mention that the universities is going to have a big focus for us. The timelines have changed, and that's an opportunity for us to do more. Actually, we are putting some structure and skeleton together inviting more efforts from our chartered members, but also engaging in a more structured way with our partners at universities. I think that's an opportunity. And we see that Dubai and the region now is becoming a hub for international universities. So it's something that we want to put some focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Bashar. I do think the innovation and disruption lies with that generation. So, as I was saying, Thai Dubai is the Middle East chapter based out of Dubai Internet City over 23 years. The easiest way to be a part of this community is by following us on our social channels. We're Thai Dubai everywhere. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, that's where we are most active. Then there's also YouTube, where all the content that we've done, including for today, will come out on the channel if you want to share it. I know there are a few people who couldn't make it. And I also want to very especially thank all the charter members of Thai Dubai who form the backbone and make all the amazing in the chapter happen across the region. Once again, thank you to our partners. And before we start, I would like to introduce you to our moderator today, Suvo Sarkar, as the name itself suggests, a ruler. He runs his own advisory firm and holds positions on various boards as both regional and global institutions such as IBM, MasterCard, McKinsey, the Asian Banker, Ektar Technologies, Newbridge FinTech, and many others. His banking experience spans more than 36 years across various banks, Standard Chartered, A&S Grindlay, Citibank, and his last gig as Senior Executive Vice President and Group Head of Retail, Banking and Wealth Management at Emirates NBD, the most profitable bank in the Middle East. Last but not the least, I urge all of you to check out his podcast, Money Majlis. It's absolutely interesting, very, very nice. It's across all regular platforms, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. I could go on, but I will call on Suvo to introduce you to our outstanding speaker for the day and who we are all waiting to hear lots from. Suvo, over to you.
Thank you, Cicely. Thank you very much. Let me start with a thank you and apology. Thank you for making a full house on a Saturday morning. Thank you, PK, for giving up gym time to be here. And you're ready for the gym after this, but thank you for being here, first of all, on a Saturday morning. Secondly, sorry about my voice. I'm recovering from a bad cold and cough. So if I am coughing in the middle of the show, please excuse me. But let me start by introducing our guest today, who's flown a long distance from Copenhagen to be here. Christina Boutrup is a leading China analyst, a thought leader, and a keynote speaker at various conferences across the world. As a journalist and correspondent, she's covered China for nearly 20 years, covering the business, economy, environmental, social issues. She's been a TV and newspaper journalist. And she's interviewed multiple personalities, including Jack Ma of Alibaba, and has written about Chinese companies, several books on China as well. She's currently working on a book, which she'll talk about later. Last time I called her, she was sitting in a church about a few hours away from Copenhagen, writing a book, because that's the only place where she could get peace to write a book on a weekend. She lived in Asia for many years. She lived in China, she lived in Singapore, and is currently on holiday in Dubai with her family. So thank you for taking time off. I want to shout out also to Peter, her husband, sitting there. They're here with their daughters to have a short break. So thank you for making the time today, Christina, for being here with us.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to meet all of you. And I think from speaking to some of you, it seems like a very interesting and diverse group. It seems like a great network that you have here. And I'm glad that you're interested to talk about China today, because there is a lot of writing about China these days, geopolitics, big power struggle with the US, the West, China, Russia, what to make of all this. And then you suddenly have big headlines about DeepSeek. And that was like a huge wake-up call for Silicon Valley and investors all over the world. But to be honest, for us who has been in China for many years, who cover China, who frequently visit Chinese tech companies, it's not a big surprise. I think the big surprise is because we tend to look towards Silicon Valley when we look for new innovations, for new technologies, for new ways of doing digital business models, etc. But it's about high time that we look the other way, look east, because there will be much more disruption, much more innovation coming out of China for sure.
So, Christina, your blog is called Wake Up Calls from China. And like you said, we had a wake up call last month with DeepSeek coming out, launching the multiple LLM models, right? I think they're called DeepSeek R1, R10, R1 Distill, and Janus Pro 7B, which is based on vision. Now, they operate with up to 671 billion parameters and deliver results as good as the other LLM models at a fraction of the cost. I was researching a holiday in Morocco we want to take later this year, and I did a search both on DeepSeek and on ChatGPT. I must say the DeepSeek output was almost as good as the ChatGPT output. I'm not sure which one I'll use eventually, but it is impressive. My question to you, Christina, is how many such wake-up calls are still there for us to wake up in the morning and learn about from China?
I think there are many actually, and we tend not to hear about them because the big international media will tell you every time Tesla launch a new model or every time you have a new iPhone coming out, even though it has no real innovation, no real new features, they will still cover that. But Huawei just launched a new phone, which I find incredible, and I can't wait to go back to China and see it and feel it myself. It just came out this week, where you don't have to send a file, or Bluetooth to send a link or a file. You actually use gesture to grab it, and then I can put it into your iPad. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? It's just another way to interact with a device. And in terms of that, you see so many new features. Facial recognition came out of China. I remember Jack Ma. I met him many, many years ago. And at that time, he was talking about how big e-commerce would get in China and how the internet would revolutionize the way we are living. And I thought he was a little bit crazy. I couldn't see his vision at all. It was back in 2006. Alibaba was very famous in China. Jack Ma was very famous in China, but not in the rest of the world. And he had this vision, right? But then in 2018, the pay with a smile feature came out in Alipay, which is like the super app, mobile payment app in China that you can use in Dubai too. I realized yesterday when I got here. And I remember in Europe there was a big outcry. This is so creepy. You pay with your face, that's because in China they surveil people, and Chinese people don't have any rights. They just have to let themselves being surveilled, and then they have this technology. There was a big outcry, especially in Europe, about this, and in the US, right? And then 5 years later, we find ourselves paying with our face every day. We use even our face in official Danish government systems, to identify ourselves. So I think that what that taught me from covering Chinese tech companies for 20 years is that the things we find too sci-fi or too crazy or too like, this is only China, right? 5-8 years after, we often see it in the rest of the world. Same goes for QR codes. Now it's everywhere. It's common sense that that's the best way to link the internet to the physical world, the online to offline, right? But in China, they paid with these for like 13 or 14 years, right? So it took I've been talking about QR codes for I think 15 years now. And it's just during the pandemic, we finally saw that around the world you can scan a code and pay, you don't have to touch everything and so on. So there are so many things, and I think the new things that we see now is very much in cars. You keep seeing new features coming out of BYD, electric car producers in China. And sometimes you're wondering, why would you need a car that can run on 3 wheels? You might think that's not really a value to you as a customer, but it might be, because it's more safe. If the car hits something, it will not roll over. It will just continue on 3 legs. They also have a car that can swim now in a river, So that means if there is a flood, which actually happens quite frequently in the south of China, you can actually cross the river in your car. So they keep innovating. They keep coming up with new features, and it's some of it just sounds crazy or like we wouldn't have that in the rest of the world. But what I learned is that a lot of the features that you see in China, you see them copied in the rest of the world from other companies later on.
So, Christina, that brings me to our next question, which is, we've known China as a source of cheap labor. From the time iPhones started getting built or being manufactured in China, it was seen to be a place where, you have a lot of quote-unquote copycats, and you have good manufacturing prowess, but really cheap labor. Now, fast forward to today, when you're looking at China as a place which is not just for manufacturing, but also for innovation, for tech revolution, right? We're seeing that, you talked about EVs, we're seeing that in green energy, which you write about, biotechnology, quantum computing, I mean, you name it. It's all happening in China. Yet, China's rank in the Global Innovation Index is number 11 when I last checked yesterday. And guess who number 1, 2, and 3 are? UK, Sweden. And Switzerland is number 1, actually. So my question to you is, one, what has prompted the shift of China from being a manufacturing hub to a technology and innovation hub? And two, how come the rest of the world puts China at number 11 in innovation? What are we not getting?
Yeah, so first of all, just 12 years or 15 years back, China had a big problem because, for example, as the largest hub of manufacturing iPhones for Apple, do you know how much value of, how expensive an iPhone is, but how many percent of the value in the phone actually goes to China where it's produced? It's around 8%. So this is not a sustainable model to keep creating new jobs for a large population of 1.4 billion people. So the government in China realized we need to climb higher up in the value chain, obviously. We need our own brands, we need our own Apple, which they have now, Xiaomi, Huawei. They might not be as popular in the US and Europe because of restrictions and because of security policy, but many other places in the world, these brands are really big and they are among the largest smartphone producers in the world, right? So they actually launched this plan called Made in China 2025. And I would like to know how many of you heard about this plan before, Made in China 2025. Okay, it's just like everywhere else I've been for the past few years. When I ask, it's always like 2-3 people in a room of 50 or 100 people. So it's not a very well-known plan, but it's a very, very important plan. So what they did is they said, in 2025, China wants to be leader in 10 important industries, including everything related to green technologies, green energy systems, electric cars, batteries, wind turbines, you name it. The only place where they fall, the only industry that they didn't succeed is the semiconductors, the computer chips, still lagging maybe 2 years behind the US. But the DeepSeek is an example how you can still try to find other ways. If you can't get enough of the best or most advanced NVIDIA chips, you find other ways to build an advanced system, and that's what we see. So another reason why this plan is extremely important is that many people believe that's actually the plan that caused Donald Trump to launch the first trade war with China. So when he was president the first time back in 2017, right? So when he took office in 2018, he launched a trade war with China. So he saw, it was like an alarm, an alert to him, this plan. If China succeeds with this plan, and from history, we know that when they make these very ambitious industrial plan, they probably will succeed, maybe 90%. So we have to take this very, very serious, right? And that plan has driven a lot of innovation. And it's surprising to a lot of people because you think that innovation comes from below, think out of the box, let the grassroots come out, the entrepreneurial mindset. But China proves that you can actually make very strong government plans if you have enough incentives, enough subsidies, if you make it attractive enough. The money, the brains, and the people will go in the right direction, right? So what that plan did was to pave the road for example, electric car industry. So China had basically no car brands, right? I mean, BYD started producing cars 20 years ago, but it was a laugh, always copycats from foreign brands, etc. And then Actually, they also appointed a former Audi engineer who worked in Germany for many years to be Minister of Science and Technology. And you know, this kind of idea that you put someone who really understands German car industry, you put him in charge of driving like science and technology in a big country like China, it actually had a huge impact. So they make a big bet. They thought combustion engines is not our thing. It's hard to catch up in this game. But they believed strongly in electrification, you know. And when you said that China is going away from being like factory of the world, manufacturing, to a high-tech economy, one thing that is important to understand is China is still a manufacturing-based economy. So China, when I initially saw the Made in China 2025 plan, I also thought, oh, they want to be like Denmark, you know, a country with hardly no factories anymore. You know, we do have factories with medicine, like advanced manufacturing, right? And some robotics, but hardly no factories, right? And then they just want to live from good ideas and innovation. No. China realized in order to make real innovation happen, you need a supply chain. You need to build things. You need to make prototypes in order for that innovation to happen. And actually in Europe and the US, more and more people now realize you can't just sit in an office and have good ideas and then send the good ideas to China, to your factory, and let them do the actual products, right? You need to build all that in your own. It was a big mistake to outsource everything from rich countries to poorer countries, right? So now in Europe and in the US, we realize we need to get that back on our own turf, right? But now it can no longer pollute. It can no longer be, it must be much more clean. So that's a big problem now when the US, they want to produce their own batteries for EVs. But one thing is, it takes a lot of energy. It can pollute the soil and the water. It's quite risky, you know, you need to know what you're doing. And then another problem that surprised many people, they don't have the technology. So when Ford wanted to make a battery factory in the US, they couldn't do it without including CATL. They had to license the technology. So the Made in China 2025 plan actually succeeded. So now China basically sits on all those technologies, meaning that they are in front in batteries, in EVs. I don't think a lot of people acknowledge that, but when it comes to cars, it's not like they just have cheap cars with a lot of subsidies. You know, these cars are much more advanced in terms of software, in terms of entertainment systems. And we now see that many of the foreign car makers are tapping into the Chinese technology platforms in China to produce their branded cars on their platforms because they are much more advanced. And then also they need the price to come down in order to compete with the Chinese brands.
In fact, you read the reviews of BYD versus Tesla. Most experts say BYD is a better car than Tesla. I don't know how many of you drive a BYD here, but I'm told by friends who drive both cars that it's a much superior car than Tesla. So they are getting into realms of superiority as well. Now, talk of innovation, Christina. You said earlier about top-down innovation, right? Yes. Government-led innovation. The theory earlier was if you don't have democracy, you don't have innovation. It has to be grassroots, bottom-up. Are you saying China has busted that myth that you can have innovation without democracy, without people's rights?
Yeah, we have to acknowledge that. And to me, as a journalist, I've seen the system of China. I've experienced that myself. You know, I know that there is not freedom of speech. I mean, not if you criticize the government, it can be really hard in China. And I would always say that if you want, because I remember I was living in China back in 2005 or 6 when the government said China wants to be an innovation-driven economy in 2020. And I thought it was unrealistic because of the top-down system, because of the lack of like civil grassroots and all that. And because of the education system, which is also like very, very strict, you know, and disciplined, and you would think that you would need young people to be more, you know, more creative, think out of the box and all that. But we just have to acknowledge that the model works very, very well because it makes it attractive. So, for example, now with the green transition, right? It's a business case. I mean, companies in China, when you visit BYD, I visited their headquarters some months ago, and they don't talk about how much carbon emission they can reduce with their cars or their batteries, or how they contribute to a much greener and better world. When you visit companies in Europe, they always talk about like ESG, like how they can make the world better, why they even go to work every day to create a better and safer planet and all that. They don't talk much about that, but that's actually the benefit of many of their products. But the driver is its incentive. So if you make a factory producing EVs, you can maybe get a piece of free land from the government. You can have 5 years or 3 years of tax break. You can have a PhD from the local university for free or very cheap. You know, there are all kinds of corporations like that, which is really, really beneficial, and it makes things moving. But it also means that suddenly you have 700 EV producers in China. And one thing that many people outside China miss about this, when they think about subsidies and strong government plans, they also face competition. So what is happening when they see, okay, now we have a critical mass, we have 700 EV companies. Some of them are just copycats from they copy BYD or they copy Huawei or whatever. But then they take away the subsidies from one day to the other, so they no longer support customers buying a green car. Before, you could get a free green number plate. And if you buy a gasoline car, you have to pay like a lot of money to get that number plate. So they could do a lot of things to make customer go in the right direction. And then suddenly they take away those subsidies. And some of the companies will die, you know, and they do. So some of the experts that I talk to believe that in maybe less than 5 years' time, you have less than five players left in China. And I think right now you have less than 100. But just 5 or 6 years ago, you had 700. So it's a red ocean, and it's bloody, and it's competitive, meaning the companies that you meet here or other parts of the world, those are the ones that already survived the bloody red ocean in China. And they are very advanced in technology, customer service. They did everything they could to cut their cost. And I think it's a big misunderstanding, especially in Europe and the US, where we imposed tariffs on Chinese cars to protect local industries, that if you put tariff on them when they get more expensive, we can compete with them. But actually, they totally miss the real point, the innovation, the speed of innovation, the speed of which they come up with new car models. It's totally impossible to keep up with that, and tariff won't get you anywhere with that.
Christina, you've been a journalist in China for 20 years. You talked about restrictions, top-down kind of government. What are some of the red lines that you could not cross? Tell us a bit about your personal story. Have you ever been in trouble in China for writing something or saying something?
You know, the thing is, you never know where the red line is, because it all depends on the context. So Chinese culture and language is very much dependent on culture. So when you're in the room, if the big manager is there, maybe you ask somebody about something and they will say, yes, there is a solution to that. But actually, maybe there is no solution, but you can't lose face. So you have to say yes, you know. So sometimes, that's why we say sometimes yes can mean no in China, right? It's just a matter about context. It's not about lying. It's about, we have to do our best to find a solution on this problem, right? And also about what is okay to say, what is okay to write. It depends on the context. The trade war with the US made a lot of technology issues very sensible. I remember visiting iFlyTech, which is a company very advanced in voice recognition, and they do a lot of stuff for educational institutions. A lot of schools in China use their AI technology to enhance the students' capabilities. So it's like a teacher assistant, actually. So it's image recognition and voice recognition. So, for example, a teacher can have maybe 50 people in one classroom, and they need to look at all those math or English tests. and there is only one answer that is it's correct or false, right? So the system can easily help the teacher correct all those assignments, but it can also help the teacher find out what kind of task do we need to give that student to enhance their capability. And another student is always weak on this point. So they have been using that for 5-6 years now. And I remember they are also doing deep fakes, so they can use video and they can make you say everything they want as soon as they have a few minutes of your voice recording, right? And I remember coming into their office just in 2018 when the trade war with Donald Trump was just launched. And there was a big video on the screen with Donald Trump speaking in Chinese, like, hello, I love China, and I think US and China should engage, and blah, blah, blah. And, and people thought it was so funny because it was texted in English so they could understand it. And we all took a video, and they were like, please don't share this, because that's very, very sensitive right now. So this is an example of something that was sensitive for the government in China because of the situation. In terms of Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, he was always so powerful in China that some people said he's actually more powerful than the prime minister of China. He's so close to the leadership. He can influence the agenda with all the tech companies. For many years, it was like that. And suddenly, he's at this summit, and he crossed the red line, saying that the state banks and the government, they are limiting innovation in the country, So he clearly crossed the line, and it was surprising to me that someone like him, who was always so aligned and always got to do and test new technologies and like approval from the government, could do something, could cross that line. So the truth is, you never know. But you can always feel that if it's something that is on the agenda, like when the government decided that to crack down on tech companies, and they decided that children could no longer play video games whenever they wanted to. I don't know if you heard about that, but they actually said that young kids who are younger than 14 could only play a certain amount of time, and until 10 o'clock at night. After 10 o'clock you couldn't, and you have to use your real ID, your face, right? So you couldn't just use your mother's account or whatever. And that was very sensitive. So nobody wanted to talk to me about it. And I thought it's just a random story, about like family life. But because it's a government regulation, nobody dared to speak out about it. Some people thought it was a really bad idea. Some people thought that's a great solution because I don't need to explain to my kid why he can't play anymore because the government said so, right? So yeah, it's very hard to say, but I did experience it, of course, myself, because it's hard to get anyone to speak in front of a camera, basically.
And COVID was worse. You lived through COVID in China, right? How was that like?
Yeah, that's when I think everyone in China realized that the system is can be very tough. When you live in China, you don't have to think about what kind of political system it is, as long as you do your business and you just do your own business and you are not into political affairs or democracy movements or anything like that. You can have a very free and very good life, right? But during COVID, everyone was treated the same. Everyone was locked up in their houses, including me and my family. And the scary thing I thought was that the top leadership of China demanded the neighborhood committee of each compound. Imagine you live in this compound here, and there is a local party member who will decide whether you can go out of your compound, whether you can go to the hospital if you fall sick, right? I think a lot of people thought that they were so powerful at that level. And one thing is that the big government or the local government is powerful, but you suddenly saw the face of all these party members that impacted and decided how you could live your life. A lot of people thought that was, and some of them couldn't handle that power, So they treated their neighborhoods very bad, or they couldn't handle the power, and that gave a lot of people distrust actually in the system. So it takes time to rebuild that because of the very harsh lockdown.
Christina, I was researching for our talk, and I looked at an article in HBR, Harvard Business Review, about a comparison of America and China for a millennial born in 1990. So an American millennial born in 1990, since 1990, we just look back and think about it, saw the internet coming in, then cell phones, then smartphones, then social media, dating apps, mobile banking, electric cars, big data, biotech, CRISPR, all of that, right? Since 1990, Americans have seen US GDP per capita grow by 2.7 times. Very impressive till you realize that somebody born in China in 1990 has seen per capita income go up by 32 times, 32x as opposed to 2.7x. In 1990, China's GDP represented 2% of the global total. It is now close to 20% of the global total. Between 2011 and 13, just 3 years, China poured more concrete than the US poured in the entire 20th century in 3 years. Now, and 3/4 of the country was rural back then, in 1990, 2/3 today are urban. My question to you is, if you're a Chinese millennial, this amount of change in your lifetime, right, in the last 30, 40 years, what does that do to you in terms of understanding of the government, of commerce, of technology, of corporations? And is that the X factor that allows China to innovate so fast compared to, let's say, European millennial or an American millennial?
I actually, both yes and no. So the reason why I say yes is because those people are so used to progress that any stagnation will be seen as going backwards, right? So they want to work for companies that are moving forward. They want to work for industries that are moving China forward, who are in the forefront of technologies and so on. And they are very critical. I mean, they are very skeptical customer. So they are probably the most courted consumers in the whole world. I'm sure you've seen it in Dubai. If you have some special shops or luxury segments catering for Chinese tourists, before COVID, it was like very important group of tourists all over the world. In Denmark, they spend 6 times the average tourist. So obviously Chinese are courted across the world, but especially in the China market, you have all brands. You have all the American brands, you have all the European brands, you have the Korean brands, you have the Japanese brands, you have all the competition in the world there. So these young consumers, and it is the young consumers that they all cater for. They can pick and choose what they want. To catch their attention is very, very hard. So that's why actually a big driver of innovation, because in order to catch their attention, you need to come up with something very smart and creative. And that's why in digital business models, we keep seeing new features coming out of China. All the new stuff you see on Instagram is taken directly out of WeChat in China, right? And Elon Musk, who took over X or Twitter, he says openly he wants to build like a super app like in China, because he realized that there are so many great features about that. And Facebook's founder, Mark Zuckerberg, openly said a few times that he wished he would have started copying WeChat earlier, because he saw so many great features, So I also think in terms of DeepSeek, that was a big surprise, of course, because of the way it's made, using less energy, using less computer chips, all that. But in terms of AI, China had breakthroughs before, TikTok, for example. It totally changed the game of social media. Mm-hmm. But because of the US propaganda, I dare to say, in this room, we all think about security issues. Oh, is it safe to download? Will I be surveilled by the Chinese state? And will I be stupid if I use TikTok because they put so many crazy stuff in there or whatever? But actually, it was the big surprise of TikTok is actually the algorithm. So ByteDance, the company behind TikTok, is one of the most advanced AI companies in the world. And actually, 15 years ago, they launched probably one of the world's first AI-driven news website. No journalists, no editors. It's called Jianri Toutiao, so it's like today's headlines. And what it does, it has like thousands of sources, and then it will just make the feed that is interesting for you or for you or for you. So their slogan is only what you care about is headlines. So that's very early on to make an algorithm that will recommend you the kind of news that you find interesting, right? So they built this algorithm, they built this system, and then they wanted to launch a social media platform. And they actually, I visited the company in October as well, and they told me the way they work is always, they do several similar things at the same time, and they find out what works. So they experiment a lot. So, for example, when they launched Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, they actually launched 2 apps, another one called Watermelon. And they just saw which one is getting the most traction, right? And that was Douyin with the short video, the For You page, the algorithm that really gets to know you very well if you love to watch cat videos, right? You will get a lot of cat videos. Since that, then that is what you get everywhere, right? The whole world has changed since then, but TikTok was a great innovation. Anyway, that's a long answer, but yes, the young people drive a lot of innovation because they are very demanding and very courted. But the reason why I also say no is because once you have lived in progress for your whole life, that means you have never experienced bad economy, you have never experienced sluggish outlook of the future, right? So I feel that a lot of young people in China are quite depressed, and you can see in the statistic, it's historical high, the unemployment of young people, because so many people went to universities and they got a very fine exam, graduated, but now they can't find a job because a lot of the tech companies are suffering, a lot of companies in China are suffering because the economy is growing at the slowest pace for more than 25 years, right? And that's why a lot of companies are going out to expand all over the world. And that means some of these people, they should go to a factory, to an EV factory, or if they want a job as an electrician, to install solar panels, or, you know, they can easily find a job. You don't have enough people in those sectors, but they don't want these jobs. So they face exactly the same issues as we do in Europe. We have a lack of labor in certain industries, but surplus in other. So the government is quite tough. They're like, just eat the bitterness. You can find a job if you want. You know, they expect them to, you know, find their path. But I am not so certain that they will listen because they are quite spoiled. Many of them. They only live through progress, right? So that's a risk of further development, actually.
That's a great perspective, Christina. China's tech story has gone through ups and downs, right? And we remember the November 2020, I think it was, when Ant Corporation's IPO, $37 billion, supposed to be the biggest IPO in the world, was cancelled just days before it was supposed to go live. And since then, we've seen a lot of teaming, if I call it, teaming of a lot of tech titans in China. What happened there? Why wouldn't China want Elon Musk to evolve out of China or Mark Zuckerberg? Why do they want to contain this ecosystem politically?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question. I mentioned before that Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, crossed that red line, and that was just before the IPO of his financial company Ant Group, right, which is behind Alipay, which was expected to be the largest IPO in the world. And there are several reasons, but I think the main reason is actually the general techlash that you saw all over the world. You know, people in all across the world started getting a little bit nervous about those algorithms. Are they making me buy things I don't want to buy? Are they making me think things that I don't want to think? Are these tech companies suddenly more powerful than the government? Where is this heading, you know? So that was one trend in China that was similar to, and also people started worrying about their data. Because to be honest, when I published my book about the great tech revolution with the facial recognition and all that just coming out back in 2018-19, China was like a cowboy land for data collection. You know, I visited a fair where Alibaba showed me their newest technology at the time, and they wanted to use the facial recognition because you pay with that, so they know your face connected to your ID, right? And then they also started buying up and also establishing their own physical chains of stores, of retail. And once you entered the physical space, they would recognize your face and they would know that I like pink and purple, right? And if I look at a purple jacket in a store, they will remember and they will show me the same jacket online on several platforms that they are in their ecosystem, you know? So this is kind of...
Creepy, right?
It's a little bit creepy, right? I mean, nowadays we are gotten used to many things like that. But at that time, it seemed like a little bit crazy and creepy. So the government wanted to regulate. And I think the reason why they started with Ant Group, so they actually forced the company to split up in several companies. That's because Ant Group at the time was almost like the world's biggest bank, you know. They had the biggest money market fund in the world, Yubao, and they had Alipay. They had several peer-to-peer lending platforms where billions of dollars were changing hands, you know, on a monthly basis. But Alibaba is like, we are a platform, you know. We don't. If you cheat him, what can we do? We are a platform. We're just making trade happening between these two people, or lending happening, right? So the government realized we have to regulate, and as a bank or as a financial service group, because that's what they are now. So that is, but the way they did it was clumsy, and it also hurt the image of China in terms of stocks. Can you even trust Chinese stocks? What if something happens to a company that is already public, right? If the government will change the regulation from one day to the other and so on. So, but there was a reason behind it, and I think it's a common misperception that Chinese AI companies are not regulated. So since then, they actually regulated quite a lot. Back in the days, you could even see an AI doctor on your phone. You didn't even, I mean, you could use an app, and the AI doctor, the AI would tell you, based on your input, what kind of diagnosis you had. And the regulation said the doctor just had to approve it quickly. And then you could get a medicine prescription and everything. But they cracked down on all that. But that's typical China. When they want innovation or development to happen, they just let everything loose. And, you know, you can test and trial and let's see what happens. And then they crack down and try to control it because it gets out of hand. And in terms of AI, you know, back in 2017, the Chinese government actually made a plan that they want to be number one in 2030. That's 5 years from now. And I told you what I experienced back in 2017 and 18, and we saw that Chinese companies were far ahead of any competitors in terms of deployment, right? Using face for payments or using voice to speak to devices. They are leading in deployment, and they have been leading in deployment for many years. And then ChatGPT came, and suddenly people in China were very surprised too. And that's also caused a lot of people to realize that the crackdown from the government on tech companies probably limited them a little bit, who want to cross an invisible line and go too far. And, you know, so people got a little bit scared, and that probably slowed down China's development. But it doesn't mean that the high-speed train is not running, you know, and we will see more breakthroughs because they made a big bet on it, and they are much faster at deploying it. So we always hear about self-driving cars or autonomous cars. I know there is a plan in Dubai, which is exciting too, but we always hear about San Francisco, right? And but in China, you have 300 cities where you can do the robo-taxis. You have public shuttle buses. You have big container ports where the traffic is autonomous with big trucks, you know, taking containers back.
This is live now? This is happening already?
Yeah, in Yangshan port, it's happening, you know, the world's largest container port. And in mines, Huawei is very big on building digital twins and autonomous systems, and their goal is that you will have 0 people in mines in the future. China has a lot of coal mines themselves, and they experiment a lot with this technology. So you use robots to dig, of course, all the resources out, but you also use these autonomous vehicles to... So the industry deployment is already far ahead in China. But everybody talks about ChatGPT and consumers. But the real interesting thing is the fourth industrial revolution, which is already happening and which China is leading, which is electrification, which is about AI and data, and it's already happening. China has dark factories with no people in them, you know. It's already happening. So as a manufacturing powerhouse, they have understood, of course you still have sweatshops who sell their cheap crap on Temu, right? That's the image many people have of Chinese factories. But the factories that I go to, and I talked to a gentleman here who told me he also went to a battery factory in China for electric vehicles. You see no people. You just see like one person in a white suit, you know, controlling a machine. It's all robots, you know. It's so advanced. So this is the future of manufacturing.
Just shifting gear from there, Christina, you're writing a book on the green revolution in China. Tell us a bit more about it. And talk about the ant forest that we spoke about.
Oh yeah, maybe we take that first. So in the current 5-year plan, which is driving development of China's economy, it's all about sustainability, going green, electrification. That's why we have seen a big push in the green technologies in the recent 4 or 5 years. It really makes a difference when it's in those 5-year plans of China. And around that time, it was actually back in 2016, Ant Group, who is behind Alipay, they launched Ant Forest, which is a system where you can collect points. It's like a game. So in your Alipay, I'm not sure if it's in the international version, if you use it in Dubai, but you can collect green points if you open a shared bike with a QR code and pay with Alipay. You can collect green points because you don't take a car, or you take public subway instead of your car, you collect green points. If you sell or buy stuff in their second-hand platform, which is growing quite rapidly, called Idle Fish, you also collect more green points. So they try to nudge a greener lifestyle, right? And when I saw that initially, I thought it was just bullshit and like company bullshit, you know, they just want to be green, you know, but it's not green to buy all the stuff you don't need on those e-commerce sites. But actually, I have to acknowledge that it really makes things moving. The deforestation agenda, you know, planting trees. So the point is, when you collect enough trees, you can plant when you collect enough points, you can plant a real tree. So you can choose what kind of tree you want to plant. And then you plant that tree and you can post it online. I planted this tree because I behaved very, very well or in a very green way, and you can inspire other people to do that. But it evolved into a game, and people get up early in the morning to steal each other's green points, you know, because it is a game and you can collect points from other people's trees, and it's really fun. It's a gamification. They are very, very strong with that, and they managed since 2016 to plant more than 120 million trees in real life, and it's the biggest like private tree planting initiative in China, at least probably in the world. And you know, Chinese people are skeptical. What if I can't trust that they actually planted that tree, right? They started talking about that on social media. And then Ant Group decided that they do satellite images, so you can actually see your actual tree on satellite, and you can also go and visit your tree if you travel to that area of China.
Interesting. But apart from that, what's happening in terms of green tech?
Yeah, so the green technology push is also happening at the same time as the real estate is going down. So the real estate has been driving Chinese economy. You probably heard about the big bubble that burst because the government wanted it to burst, because people couldn't afford living in big cities anymore, and it just spiraled like this. And for all the years I have been working with China, they have tried to crack down on the speculation, right? Because there are so many houses being built, nobody lived there. You can pass thousands of apartments in some province, and you're like, it's all empty, no lights. And people will tell me they're all sold, you know. Then people will sell them a few years later, and they can earn money on that. But now they crack down on speculation, and you can no longer finance the next project until you finish building the first project, etc. So there are a lot of big problems happening from that. But real estate actually made up 1/3 of China's GDP. And that's a big problem, right? So they need new drivers of economic growth. And they believe that manufacturing and the green transition of the manufacturing of solar panels, heat pumps, electrolyzers, all the equipment you need for the green transition in China and in the rest of the world, that can be a new driver. And it happened, actually. So last year, 25% of the new economic growth in China was actually made out of green technologies. So China has basically become a green superpower. And that's what my new book is about. Because I realized that China is still the largest carbon emitter in the world. They emit one third of global carbon emission.
But they're peaking this year, aren't they?
They are peaking this year.
And they'll go down from here.
Yes. But do you know why they emit that much in China? Have you ever thought about it? Do you think it's because Chinese people like to take hot showers and drive big cars and use a lot of technology?
No, because they're manufacturing iPhones. That's why they're emitting, right?
So the real explanation, which is, they use coal power. They still get more than 50% of their energy from coal power. And that's a problem, but that's the green transition that they have a plan for now. But the point is, China produces 1/3 of all manufactured goods in this world. So think about all the things you have in this world. I'm not talking about our clothes, our bags, our shoes, our cars, our car parts in your branded Western cars. No, I'm talking about chemicals, ingredients, components going into all other stuff that is made in this world. So now it's 1/3, but actually UN, they have an organization for industrial development where they estimate that in 2030 it will be 45%. So China will produce 45% of all this goods in the world in 2030. So that means the green equipment, I mean, they produce more than 80% of the solar panels in this world. They produce basically all the nacelles, which is the core component of wind turbines. So you can't really make a wind turbine without China. They realized that in the US. When Vestas, the leader, which is the Danish company, said that, we build made in the US wind turbines. It's not really 100% true because they can't get the rare earth metals that they need for the magnets to make the thing go. They can't get them outside China. There are some factories now around the world, but it's so limited, so you can't really buy enough outside China. So one thing is they sit on so much of the supply chain because they decided they want to sit on this supply chain. So they attracted all these industries and components, etc., to China. But China also deployed so much solar and wind that it's more than the rest of the world combined the last 2 years. So there is a green revolution happening. Even though you see headlines last year that China is building, licensing, they are accepting 2 new coal power plants a week or something. And you're like, it's such a dirty superpower, right? But actually, those coal plants are backup. So China realized that the transition to green energy is very risky, especially after the war in Ukraine, the pandemic, the new Cold War with the US. You don't know what can happen. What if you can suddenly no longer get oil from somewhere, or you can no longer get whatever you need? Coal, they have enough of it. It's abundant resource in China. So that's their plan B, their backup. So you should be careful not to misperceive that they are building all the coal power plants because they're not using them. So they're not like on full capacity. They are just there because they need them for backup. If the Yangtze River dries up, you don't have enough water power, right? That happened 2 years ago. And people will not accept that you cannot get power. And will we accept we cannot get our components from China or our cars from China because they don't have power? So they want to make sure that they have enough power. And another thing, I see that because China is expecting to peak emission this year, it means that probably the world will peak emission this year. And some experts say it probably also means peak oil this year. That's bad news for some oil-producing countries, obviously, because you can already see now, because of China's transition into electric cars, it will impact the oil price, because China is the largest consumer of oil in the world. And when they no longer need that much oil for their industry, for their transportation, it will have a great impact. So the electrification, and China is leading the electrification because they are leaders in battery. They are leaders in all those technologies that you need. And what I see now is that because they're building, they now sit on 60% of all turbines, wind turbines, and 60% of all solar panels in the world are now in China. That means they have so much green energy, they can't really absorb it in their grid, right? So what will happen to that abundant energy? They can try to store it in batteries, and that's what they're doing now. In every province, they're building systems. They're trying to include all the EV cars, so all the batteries can store the power, and you can try to use it in compounds and office buildings and so on. So they are building a brand new, very, very modern energy system that can inspire a lot of countries in the world. But the other thing you can do if you don't store it, that is you can make green hydrogen, right? You can use electrolyzers to make green hydrogen. And that can be made into fuel for airplanes, for trucks, for heavy transportation. And in Europe, a lot of people think that, oh, we can build our own system for that. You know, we have a lot of wind energy in Denmark. We can build a hydrogen pipe to Germany, and we can supply their industry with this green energy from Denmark. But the thing is, it will soon be a commodity, the green fuel that will compete with the oil, right? So green fuels for airplanes, for trucks, for ships, that is made out of green hydrogen. So that green, when China has that much, and in their government plan, it says China will likely be an exporter of green fuels in the future. So that means China will suddenly be the Saudi Arabia, you know, or other countries that are energy rich or oil rich. And this totally changed the whole energy game and the whole power game of the world. So those companies like A.P. Møller-Mærsk, the big shipping company, or other big companies that need a lot of green fuel because they have their own goals they have to fulfill. They told their stock owners or their shareholders, we will do this in 2030. So they can't just use black fuel. Yeah. They have to do it, right? And they want to buy it where it's cheapest. They have to. They're competing, right? So the thing is, China could be an energy exporter. And that's why you need to hurry in this region, because you have enough solar power, right? So if you build your capacity fast enough, you can supply all the local shipping in this area. We just talked about how important shipping for world trade is in this area. So I think for Dubai and this region, it's such an important, you can't wait, because then China will supply enough and it will be so cheap that you cannot even compete. Even if you produce it, you will have to pay subsidies to make your companies buy it, right? That's really a challenge for many other countries in the world.
Very interesting. That gives me time to ask questions from the audience. Can we ask anybody? Yeah, there.
Thank you so much. You inspired us so much, so I'm ready to buy a ticket and go to migrate to China. But
you have to go and see it for yourself.
I've been a couple of times. But why did you move out of China? I mean, I don't need the personal answer. I mean, my question is more about, tell us the negatives. Because very soon China will be a superpower. There was a survey on Facebook. I don't know how many people filled it, but very few people around the world prefer China as a world leader compared to the US. So any comments on that, please?
That's a really good question. And actually, in my book about the green superpower, I try to explore, will China color the world red or green? So in red, I mean not communist, but their political system. Will that impact a lot of countries that is trading more with China, or is that their purpose, right? And the good news is China is mainly in for the business. They don't care so much about what kind of system you have in your country, as long as they can trade with you, because their own economy is very dependent on trading with the whole world, and they will not stop doing that. That's the plan for the future, to be this big manufacturing of high-tech technologies, right? So China is trying to navigate that and just trade with everyone. But what we do see is a kind of new grouping in the so-called Global South. I don't know,
BRICS.
Yeah, BRICS, you know, new groupings that some people say they are anti-Western. But actually, I don't see it that way myself. I think I'm more balanced than many people in Europe or the US. But the thing is, they have shared interests. They want to trade. They don't like tariffs. They like globalization, right? Because that benefits their economy. It creates jobs, etc. And in the West, we want to put a lot of tariff, a lot of limitation, green barriers. So we are creating this club of rich countries that can afford to pay more for products because we don't want them to enter our regions. But then in the end, you have all these other countries that happen to be the emerging markets in the world. And I warn about that because I think we will shoot ourselves in the foot if we don't engage more in the global south. That means you have to stop preaching about human rights, talking about how our system is better than your system. It doesn't, I mean, they don't want to listen to that anymore, you know? They want to just build their own society, their own countries. So in the West, if they don't want to lose out on those new emerging markets, we have to be much more pragmatic. Our companies need to lower the price of their products because Chinese companies and Russian companies and other companies, they know how to tailor products for those markets. And our companies, they have these premium, expensive products. It's a big challenge. So I don't think we should be worried in the whole world, but of course in Asia, many people are worried because China wants to replace the US in Asia as the sole superpower. They want US out of Asia. And a lot of smaller countries like to feel more safe with the US patrolling there, protecting Taiwan. Some other countries, they don't feel so safe if the US leave, which could happen now with Donald Trump, right? But in the rest of the world, China doesn't have a plan to overtake the role of the US. What they want is just to have a more multipolar world order where more countries have a say. Yeah, that's my belief.
US may leave, but may end up in Denmark, taking Greenland, for example. It may end up in Panama, taking
who
over
should we
Panama.
fear most?
Or end up in the region taking Gaza.
Yeah. So I think in all this discussion, we have left the geopolitics out, probably deliberately. Yeah. But I think that's a fault line. We will probably change everything that you say. Yes. You know, that is the bigger issue. I see that we are in denial on that. The Belt and Road Initiative is all but dead. Okay, if it's not dead, it is being killed one by one. In fact, Donald Trump's, the first utterances on the global, all of them have some kind of an anti-China, anti-Belt of Road kind of which includes Panama, which includes even the risk of Greenland going that side. So if you look at it from that, and India, for example, has been the other bulkhead against the, you know, if you look at it from that perspective, it's almost impossible to, for example, see the green vision of China coming to a larger part of the world. However much you may say, like everybody likes cheap goods, but the world is going right. I don't see any single country which is not going right. The whole thing about there's a make in India, there's a make in UAE, there's a make in Abu Dhabi, there's a make in Dubai. There's everybody is doing the same. Everybody's understood they need to manufacture there. Rightly or wrongly, I'll see a lot of Chinese factories come in Jebel Ali and call themselves UAE manufactured. I understand that. But the truth remains that are we in denial globally that the next 10 years are not going to be logical, as you say, for us looking for it, will probably be like far more governed by local or regional or for that matter, almost xenophobic agendas in that sense. And China hasn't been very good in that. Like it does convey this whole pressure top-down, you know, the Sri Lanka issue has been an issue where people like kind of put Belt and Road as like this is going to become a debt trap for a country. And it's happened in Kenya, it's happened in So how do you think all these things are going to reconcile? Especially, so I'll come back to the first thing I talked to you about, like as a Danish person losing Greenland. How does this begin?
Yeah, geopolitics is in everything, that's for sure. But I don't agree that Belt and Road is like in that much of a crisis. It was during the pandemic, simply because Chinese companies stayed home, because you couldn't travel, you were locked up in your home, and also because of risk. The Chinese government and the Chinese state has become much more risk averse, just like every other government and company. Everything is about resilience, about risk these days, right? So they also want to de-risk. That means that the big scale projects in developing countries that are very, very risky, China is not doing them anymore. So what they do now is small and beautiful, what they say. So that means solar plants, new energy systems, building a local factories to process some raw material that goes into batteries in Indonesia, and help those countries build their own supply chain, which is what they want, So actually, I think the denial thing is true, because what we think in Europe, we think we trade less with China. And I think India thinks we are like de-risking from China, right? So a lot of companies would love to buy more stuff in India or in Mexico, so you don't have to buy it from China. Yeah, because then you are less dependent on one country, because the Russian gas issue proved to Europe, at least, that was a very bad idea. But the thing is, when you look at the statistics, you just see that China's trade with exactly these countries is booming. So the numbers of components, resources going into India, Vietnam, Mexico is just like this. It totally follows their curve of trade with the West. So what I suggest in my new book is, if you want to do de-risking and you are serious about it, it doesn't help buying stuff in Vietnam, for example. You should build those factories in Europe. If you really mean it, if you really want to take into account the worst case scenario, which could be a war in Asia over Taiwan, which I don't think it will happen, but if that happened, you would sanction China, you wouldn't buy from China, right? You would have a big problem. And even Vietnam might choose sides. And maybe many people think it would choose the West, but it shares a very long border with China, and it's totally dependent on China. I'm not so certain that you can be 100% sure that Vietnam will choose you and help you. Could also be they will choose China, right? So is that really de-risking? So if you mean it, do it. Then you really have to plan for worst case scenarios, and the world is not ready for that yet. They still don't want to pay too much, That's the thing. It's about greed. That's why we became so dependent in the first place, because Russian gas was so cheap and manufacturing in China was so cheap. We knew it was not a good idea to put everything in one basket, right?
Other questions there? Yeah, the lady there.
Hi, Christina is really impressive, and even from we call ourselves from China expert from China perspective, your presentation is very impressive. My name is Denise. I bring with some of my Chinese friends, and who's one of them from what you mentioned, the ByteDance, we should talk about TikTok and all these things. Maybe they can share with you more. And from my perspective, since we talk about AI, so I would like to know, because you mentioned about the whole supply chain, it relates to the data center, cloud, and semiconductor and everything to make the AI work. And what do you see the dynamic of the globally in terms of the AI supply chain, and as a fund, as an investor's perspective, where are the opportunities, where the dynamic moves to appear to be attractive, and in terms of the whole supply chain. And also from the China's perspective, the appearance of the DeepSeek changed the dynamic a little bit. And from that perspective, how do you see that will leading to in future? Especially yesterday, I look at the news. Amazon's cloud business was in a kind of sluggish because of the lacking of data center infrastructure and etc. So how do you see the Chinese play a role in it? That would be appreciated.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think the data centers is a very strategic industry for the Chinese government, because it's a critical infrastructure, and also it's a supply chain, as you say. And China is all about supply chain, right? So China did some really smart things, I think, in terms of doing those organizing centralized computing power to help companies tap into that system, so they don't have to all invest that much money, but they can kind of rent that infrastructure or like a utility service. I think that's really smart, because it's all about getting access to computing power. And then they have this plan to build data centers all over the world because they have the technology. They would like to do that, but I think because of geopolitics, there might be some barriers in some countries, but there are also some countries where they just can't ask all that question. They just need things to work right now, right? And if China at the same time can come up with solution that spends less energy, that is, I think, all about, that is probably the crucial thing right now. If you have a concept where you can prove that you spend less energy, that's what it's all about, right? And I think China will play a big role, but it's difficult for me to say how it will go in terms of geopolitics, because everything can happen with Donald Trump, you know. And to be honest, as long as he's paying for the war in Ukraine, everything can happen with Europe too, because we don't have our own free will. As long as the US is paying for the war and our security, they can tell us what they want us to do. And we have seen that in many cases now. But if he pulls out, Europe will be more independent and will have to make their own choice in terms of what kind of technology they will welcome, what kind of countries they will work with, right?
Okay, question here and then there. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. At the bottom.
Switched off.
Yeah.
Hi, I think everyone can hear me. Christina, what a wonderful presentation this morning. Thank you. My name's Simon. I've been in telecoms innovation labs for the last 30 years, specializing in machine learning and automation and robotics with AI. There are a couple of things that I think underpin what you've been saying. We have a global framework for innovation, which is across the world. It includes countries like India, China, etc. And we've been doing it for a very long time. That global framework has provided the ability to collaborate across states. And if you look at that collaboration, those are multi-generational employees, new employees coming in every year. And so effectively over that 20-year period, what started off as being, I'm going to use India as the example, low-cost labor coming in to do the jobs that were in IT that were lower value, allowing the onshore teams to do higher value stuff, over 20 years means that everybody's doing the same value. And it's the same in China. We've had China in the system now for 15 years. They started off building intranets, now they build the core systems. One of the things that's really impressive is that when I look at design, we've all had Apple gear. It says designed in California, assembled in China.
Sorry, the question, please, because we are short of time.
Yeah.
Please.
So the question is actually about data centers, because that's the area that I focus on. What China has done with DeepSeek is the ability to knock out GPUs. They have control of land, so they can build the data centers. They have the assembly capability in China to build chips. So they can build the data centers, they can build the machines that go in the data centers. They've now got the technology to host and do the computation without American technology, and therefore they become a new winner. I'm interested in your thought based on that.
Yes and no, because they still depend on NVIDIA chips, right? I mean, they have their own, but the most advanced, they're still a few years behind.
I'm sorry, it doesn't require NVIDIA chips. It works without chips.
Yeah. I think if you ask people in China, they would still say that they are lagging behind. And yes, that's one breakthrough, but it doesn't mean that you don't need those chips anymore. But it's true that they have, I mean, everything Donald Trump has done and Joe Biden has done to try to limit China's development has actually encouraged them to invest more billions. and that's why we see breakthroughs now. And I think where we will see
That's helped innovation in China further.
It has, because you are on a burning platform.
Yeah.
You can continue if you don't have access. And what will the next thing be, right? So they really have to be self-sufficient in the most advanced technologies. And you mentioned robots, and I think one of the next big things will be humanoid robots. And Chinese government made a plan that they want to mass produce humanoid robots this year. And that comes together with the large language models, and those humanoid robots are not just robots like an arm walking around that you have seen in a factory, right? They are intelligent. They can learn tasks in your home, in your elder care center, in your factory. And I must say that is one of the areas where I thought, oh, it's a little bit sci-fi again, right? But when I realized that they have this plan to mass produce them, and I visited Ubitech in Shenzhen, which is one of the world's leading companies, and they deployed in 10 car factories for NIO, the Chinese car producer, but also Audi, BYD, a lot of Chinese, but including Audi. So they start out with car manufacturing because those...
It's being called Gen R, I believe. After Gen X and Gen Y is Gen R.
Yes, Gen R. And those robots do the tasks that people usually do in a car factory. And they say the price will soon be that low that it will be, you can replace 3 humans with one humanoid robot in a car factory. And then they told me that they believe in a few years' time you will have one in every home. See it as a companion to help you do your bed, take out your stuff from your car. And it's hard to imagine, but they really believe that's the next disruption of the way we live and the way we work. And because China lacks so many people, I really believe that they believe that technology is the solution. And it's we will see. That is one example where what they can do because they have all the technologies and the whole supply chain. And I talked to the guys from Ubitech. They said, you know, whenever we want to test and try something, the whole supply chain in Shenzhen is just outside our door. It will take us less than 2 or 3 or 4 hours to travel to that factory who can produce that little thing we need in our robot, right? And then you can make it. So that is the speed.
It's called Shenzhen speed. It's called Shenzhen speed, I believe. Okay, last 2 questions. Sorry.
Just to put that point, there's a sign on the Tesla factory in Fremont, which actually tells you the population of humans versus robots in that factory.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't.
And it's 1:10.
Yeah.
So the robots are 1,000 something, and the humans, if I remember correctly, was 100 something in that factory. It's a different story. They were all KUKA robots.
Yeah, from Germany, but owned by a Chinese company. But Elon Musk also said that he believes there will be...
He's one of the biggest fans of China, by the way.
Yeah, that is going to be interesting, how that will play out with Donald Trump and Elon Musk being married with the Chinese government, right? I mean, he says that Taiwan is a part of China and everything. He's totally aligned with the Chinese government. And I'm very curious to see how that will play out. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Who can predict that?
Question here, Liv.
Yeah. Here. Christina, thank you very much for a wonderful rendition. That was great. I come from the world of technology, and I've had the privilege of dealing with China for many years now, including spending a stint of time in Beijing and Shanghai. So I can absolutely relate to what you're saying. My question is, like, we all understand the virtues of China. And China has been a phenomenal exporter of everything, capital, ideas, product. What is your perspective, a very honest perspective, in China's ability to import, right? And basically open the world to its own industries and its own communities and its own world in general. Because that is something that I felt was pretty restrictive, and especially taking actions like closing out foreign vendors to sell into state-owned enterprises, for instance. For many years, ICBC and Bank of China and Agricultural Bank of China, or the 3 telcos, they've been phenomenal consumers of technology. And I had the privilege of being part of that and benefiting from it. But then there came a sudden stop. I haven't been dealing with China for the last 3 years or so, so would love to have a perspective. How is that part of China's being changing with the other changes that you very nicely worded, and those are facts. So what do you think on the flip side of how China is responding?
I mean, I heard from a friend who worked for a state-owned Chinese company. One day, a person came into the office and said, give me all your iPhones, and then they got a Huawei phone, right? From one day to the other, they had no choice. They just had to use the local smartphone, and they have to use the local chips if they can in their manufacturing. And so the Chinese government is making it very, very clear that they want to promote this self-sufficiency, right? And in terms of engaging with the whole world, and I mean, that is in a way a step backward, right? Because China has been very good at taking the best from all over the world. They always invited the scientists and experts and technologies from the whole world to include in their own development. But now, because of the world situation, and they don't want to be dependent on anyone if they can avoid to, right? So we see them closing a little bit. But then on the other hand, some industries are opening up, like pharmaceutical. They are now making it possible for foreign pharmaceutical companies to take over local startups that are powered by AI, who are really disrupting cancer treatments. And I'm surprised, why would Chinese government let those companies sell to foreign companies, right? But I think it's important for China to also, both for their development, obviously, to speed up the development of the healthcare system, to make it world-class for their citizens, because that's one measure that the government will be measured on, but also because they want to prove that they're still much more open. So when the US put tariff on more and more countries, right, that China said, okay, we take away any tariff from the 40 poorest countries in the world, so they can just export to China with no tariff at all. So they're always trying to go the other direction for signal, to prove that they're open for business, right?
But that's the point that I'm making, that they're very opportune, or they seem to be very opportune in willing to import intellectual property.
Yes.
The moment that intellectual property can be capitalized for creating a product that can be sold to the rest of the world, they'll go off and do that. And they've done that to America for years now, especially in the areas of technology. My question is, do you see a change coming in that way of thinking or behaving from what it's been doing for the past 10 years?
Oh, okay. Now I understand. So yes, there is a change. So until now, what they have been really good at is taking some technology that someone else developed and then re-engineered it or commercialized it. I cannot count how many patents from European universities has been capitalized in China and in the world market from Chinese companies. But that's also why you think, that's also come back to the survey or the index of China's innovation power. That is always measured on like
how many patents?
Groundbreaking innovation, something the world hasn't seen before. And so far, China hasn't come up with that many things that the world hasn't seen before. But that is changing now. The new focus on their research as well. You know, so far in universities, many of the leading scientists, they have been very focused on solving problems in the real world. So it's all about solving the water crisis or solving the issue with payments or solving whatever problem. But now they are at another level as an innovation powerhouse, as scientific superpower, where they spend more money on basic research. And experts and several think tank reports that I read recently predicts that we will see groundbreaking innovation.
In fact, their R&D spending, I read, was $700 billion, close to US $800 billion. So they're coming close to US in R&D. Unfortunately, time is up.
Yeah.
But before I close, I had one last question for you, Christina. For people like us who want to know more about China, what resources can we get? I believe you do a tour of China. What do you provide in terms of Chinese insights?
Yeah, I mean, I've facilitated some trips, but first of all, I would recommend you to read Chinese media. Even state-controlled media like People's Daily Online or Xinhua News or whatever. Of course, it's state-controlled and you don't see all kind of stories, but they do promote Chinese technology. Yeah, I know, yeah. But anyway, in terms of business and technology, you will certainly read about DeepSeek before you read about it in Financial Times. I mean, I started talking about DeepSeek in December when they first came out, and I predicted that would be a big thing in 2025. It was easy when you read those media, right? But also South China Morning Post, which you have to pay for, but they have this future tech section that I really recommend. And there's another media that is free. It's called Rest of World. So they cover tech in India, in Pakistan, in Africa, in China. Really interesting instead of the Western perspective. And then it's no secret that I really believe going there, seeing it for yourself is extremely important. So in October, I did a trip with a boutique leadership bureau from London. So some of the leaders that came were from Netflix and from Tesco and from world-leading companies. And I was a little bit nervous. Can I show them anything in China?
And you had Abdulaziz Al Ghurair from Dubai as well, right?
Yes, we had some of the top people from Masrek Bank here. And I was a little bit afraid, can we show them something they will be, inspired by or surprised about? But they were like, we have seen the future. So the thing is, the deployment, the way you use AI in customer service, avatars, all those deployment scenarios, they are so far ahead that it's very, very inspirational. So I can only recommend people to do that. And it helps to experience it. Those of you who have been there, seen it with your own eyes, know what I mean, right?
Wonderful. Thank you.